So for buyers, come and ask questions. How does your program work? I basically give the same explanation. I mean, for tenant buyers, I let them know, and I typically try to get straight to the point because you don't want to spend a ton of time with someone who you're not even going to be able to help. So I basically let them know uh, our program is fairly simple to qualify for. There's two main requirements that we have to participate in our lease purchase program. One, you have to demonstrate that you can afford the monthly payment of the size of house that you want to get into. For example, if you are looking to get into a house that's $1,200 a month, then you've got to be able to show that you can feasibly be able to make that payment based on your other obligations that you've got and with the income that you make, right? Second main requirement that we have is all of our houses require a down payment, and that down payment is made upfront before you move in. Typically, that down payment is anywhere between 3 to 5% of the agreed sales price. So if it's a $1,200 a month payment, chances are that's going to be about a $200,000 house. So minimum that you would need would be about $6,000 to $8,000 down. In some cases, depending on the owner, they may require as much as, $10,000 to $12,000 down. And then I'll ask at that point, does that fit your budget? Is that does it sound like that would work for you? And then right then they're either going to eliminate themselves or ask more questions, right? And some of the other questions that we get is how much, so we kind of tackled that already, like how much money do I need down? And I just let them know we require. Now, if they're interested in one of our properties, typically our properties are marketed somewhere around that 4 to 5% range. So if it's a $200,000 house, I'm probably advertising it on the low side for $8,000 down. Okay. Now, on all of our advertising, we do put flexible on there. And the reason that we say that is because, we have had tenant buyers that have come in and said, hey, I've got $6,000 now. I can pay the other $2,000 in 30 days. In a scenario like that, we could work with the tenant buyer. In fact, I think I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. Like right here, would the owner take less money down? And my answer to that question is it depends. At minimum, they're going to require at least half of the down payment deposit now, and typically the balance is going to have to be paid over the next 30, maximum 60 days. So, I mean, if you're looking for a longer term solution, so like you can see the next question from a tenant buyer here is, can I break up that down payment over time? Not usually, unless if you are coming up with the bulk of that down payment deposit. Like if it's an $8,000 down payment, and they've got $6,000 that they can pay now, and they want to pay the balance over, 10 months, like at $200 a month, possibly, right? But there's going to have to be some compensating factors for that. Compensating factors like how long of a lease purchase period are they asking for? How much, basically, what it equates to is, are they a higher risk or a lower risk? If they're a lower risk tenant buyer, like they've got good references, they're asking for a shorter lease purchase term, they make great money, you know what I mean, things like that, then chances are, the owner's going to be more willing to work with a tenant buyer like that than someone who has horrible credit. They're asking for a 3-year term, stuff like that. So anyways, hopefully that answers your question as far as that goes. Let's see here. I know I skipped a couple here. How much do I need down? Can I just rent the house first? So that's probably, probably should be number one. That's probably the number one question we get asked from our marketing, from properties that we market. And those of you guys who have already been marketing know that that's the case. Even though I prominently advertise on our properties that the down payment is $8,000, $10,000, $15,000 down, I would say probably 30 to 40% of the calls we get are wondering, would we just rent the property? And the answer is very simple: no. Unless if the owner has specifically let me know that they want me to also entertain regular tenants, then the answer is no. So I mean, that's how you answer that. That's how I answer that question. Um, let's see here. What if I don't end up purchasing the property? And again, these questions again are pretty simple, straightforward. Basically, if you don't end up purchasing the property, you are walking away from whatever money you put down and any rent credits you may have earned during that period. What if the seller doesn't make their payments to the lender? I let them know that, first of all, we do our due diligence up front to make sure that the lender is current. They can't be in foreclosure. They can't be behind on their payments. And uh, how we find out is we require that the owners provide a current mortgage statement that shows that their payment is current. And then once we put the transaction together, we will set it up through a third-party payment processing company. So as long as you, the tenant buyer, are making the monthly payments, then the payments are being made to the mortgage lender because they're getting paid from the third party. So I haven't ever had any issues with that in the last 3 years that I've been focusing on lease option and seller finance deals, because we've set them up that way from the very beginning, avoiding that problem altogether. What if the home doesn't appraise when I'm ready to buy? So good question, valid, right? I let them know that, again, that is a risk that's involved. And this is a question, honestly, I probably should have put this question up on the seller side, because I think this question gets asked more by sellers than it does from potential tenant buyers. But my answer is very simple. That is a risk that exists. I don't want to pretend like there's no risk involved, and that is one of those risks. But we can handle that one of several ways. Either one, first of all, if the home doesn't appraise, let's say by a small margin, like 1% or 2%, you as the owner or tenant buyer, I let them know, the owner can still elect to reduce the price down to the appraised value. Like, let's say the seller's motivated enough and they've got the means to do so, they can reduce their sales price to whatever it appraised for, just to have it be done with, right? Let's say they're not in a position to do that, or they're not willing to do that. Another option they have is, let's think about it. If the tenant buyer's been making their payments on time and they still want to buy the property and now they qualify and they've been maintaining the property, does the seller really want the property back if it's not appraising? No. So it's in the seller's best interest to work with that tenant buyer, especially if they still want to move forward. Now, the tenant buyer does have the option to walk away from the transaction. Again, it was a risk that was disclosed to them when they moved in, that it was possible that would happen. So if they walked away, they don't get that down payment deposit. But what I've recommended to both tenant buyers and owners is, look, if we still want to keep that transaction together, I mean, the tenant buyer doesn't really want to move because, they don't want to uproot their kids. They've got friends. They go to church there. We can extend that lease purchase period, by an additional 12 months to allow property values to catch up to whatever the appraised value is. We could also roll it into a longer-term solution, like a seller finance, right? Like maybe a 3-year or a 5-year seller finance. So, I mean, the reality is if the tenant buyer's been making their payments on time and the house is kept up, why wouldn't they, right? The seller doesn't want the property back. The buyer really doesn't want to move, or again, they can choose to walk away from the transaction altogether. It really hasn't been an issue that we've confronted. In fact, all the deals that we've put together, which I'm actually surprised I haven't had this issue come up yet, because I would have expected that at least on one of our deals it would have. But yeah, we haven't had an issue. In fact, we just wrapped one up last week where I thought we were going to have an issue and we didn't. Okay, so last one here, can I make improvements to the house? And I let the tenant buyer know that as long as it's in writing and approved by the owner, if it's a lease option, then they can make those improvements. We just wrapped one up yesterday where the tenant buyer is going to actually invest. I mean, it's a lease option. They put down $15,000. They're going to put in a fence. they're going to put in an RV pad. I mean, they're going to invest about $5,000 in addition to their $15,000 that they just put down. And I just let them know that, as long as that's approved by the owner, and why is the owner not going to approve that? But as long as it's approved. But they also run the risk that if they are not able to purchase the property, you've basically improved that property for the owner. So anyways, those are some common questions that I get from both landlords, tenant buyers, and landlord sellers.